everyone, and welcome once again to the Open Mic, Writers in Their Own Words, where every show I talk to writers about their work, the publishing industry, their motivations, their processes, and how they do that thing they do. The show is available by the same name on both YouTube and via all of the major podcast platforms, and you can subscribe to either or to both, which of course would be my preference, so you never miss a thing. And while you're there, if you don't mind, please hit subscribe and also leave a review. It really does help people find the show. And I like to think people will want to find the show because not for me, but certainly because I have guests that I think are very, very interesting. And I think if you're interested at all in writing, you will also find them interesting. So please do leave that review. It helps people find the show. Okay, end of commercial there. Let's get on with it because I really think most of the authors who I've been fortunate enough to have come on the show have pretty interesting backstories. I really do. I think they all do. But my guest today really does have to be in the upper echelon of backstories in that regard, because she's been an actor, a yoga instructor, a martial arts teacher. She has apparently fought in the Chicago Golden Gloves competition. She
Twice.
ran in the Chicago Marathon. She's competed in correct me if I'm saying this wrong, the Savate World Championships in Paris, which has is about kickboxing and martial arts. Um, in addition to being a writer, she also does short story narration. And in addition to all the martial arts and boxing skills, I understand she's pretty good with a bow and arrow and a sword. So, hey, with all of that in mind, I mentioned the writing thing. She's also pretty good at that. Last fall, her debut suspense novel, Ghost Tamer, as I try to get that out, it came out last fall. I'm reading it right now, and I'll just tell you, it's a real rocket ride. And I'm about a little over halfway through right now, and I'm just really, really liking it. And I said I have got to get her to come on the show, and thankfully, she was willing. So please welcome Meredith Rae Lyons to the open mic. Meredith, thanks for being here today. How are you doing?
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm doing really well. I'm so glad you're enjoying the book.
I am really enjoying the book a lot, and I have all kinds of reasons for that, which I'll get to in just a minute. But for those who may not be aware of it right now, I'm going to give you an opportunity here to tell us all about it.
All right. Well, Ghost Tamer is about aspiring comedian Rayleigh in Chicago. She is riding the L home with her best friend from an open mic, and it flies off the rails, killing everyone on board except for her. And now she can see ghosts. One of them says he's been with her all her life, and another one is now trying to destroy her and take her soul.
That's pretty succinct. I like it. And I will tell you, like I say, it's really a very fast-paced. I like that your protagonist is a comedian. I mean, there is
Mhm.
definitely some humor here, but it's not a comedy. But there's some humor. There's very for a ghost story or a story, with
With
ghosts,
ghosts.
there's a lot of reality here, of course. And again, I think it's very fast-paced, very well written. Character development's great. So I recommend it highly to anyone who was thinking about it. And I don't want to spoil anything for anyone either, but I have to tell you a story about reading the
I'm
book.
excited.
So my wife and I were on vacation last week, and I took my Kindle with me as I always do, and I'm reading. In some of our downtime, I'm reading, and at some point, I had to have been making a face or maybe grumbling because I do that sometimes when I'm reading something. And my wife asked me, "Well, what's going on here?" And so I showed her the book. I showed her what I was reading, and I said, "There is a character in this book that I just want to punch in the face, right?
Yes.
God, this guy is just making me so damn angry, right?" And she goes, "Well, he must really be, written really well." And I said, "Yeah, he is actually." And that's the thing, because I was having a visceral reaction to this character. And
I get messages constantly in the middle, like from friends or relatives or anyone's like, I want to punch Dylan or something like that. And I'm like, what did he just do? Because there's more than one thing.
I really commend you because I think, as a writer, the thing we all trying to do is to engage the reader, right? You're trying to get them pulled into the story and engaged with your characters in your story. And so I wanted to tell, bring that up in that way because that's what it did. It had pulled me in to the point where, God, I'm having this visceral reaction to this guy. So, tell me a little bit, I guess, about, how you developed these characters and, I hope he's not based on anybody because he's a
Oh,
jack.
he's based on an ex-boyfriend,
Well,
100%.
okay. Now you got to tell us. Tell me the story. Give me the 411 on all this.
Oh, well, most of my characters are all of the characters are themselves. There are a few who are amalgamations of people that I know, but um some of them just came out of the ether, fully formed of from my imagination. But I Rayleigh, I decided to make a comedian. She's the main character because the story it delves into grief, it delves into loss, and she goes through some heavy stuff. And so there had to be some humor in it. Otherwise, you're not going to want to stick through it. There has to be some joy and some light in mixed into those things. And the relationship between her and Casper just I had so much fun writing them, and they kind of wrote themselves. I did decide. So Dylan wasn't when I am a pantser, so I don't know what's going to happen when I start writing. And Dylan evolved, and at first, believe it or not, he was not terrible enough. When my editor got it, she was like, I just don't think that this dude is, basically as bad as, all of that. And she's like, can we lean in and I was like, absolutely. So I went back into my little tackle box and I was like, worst ex-boyfriend ever. Let's pull some of these traits out and like feed them into this character. And so a couple of those things are definitely pulled from life. And hopefully he's not that bad anymore, but you never know.
Well, again, I love the characterization and I love, so I guess I should say, first of all, I'm a sucker for ghost shows. I really am. I have, God, I obsessively watch the Dead Files and, Paranormal Caught on Camera, whatever, all these cheesy ones. And it used to only be when I was in hotel rooms and, I had to be traveling for work or whatever. But now I find myself watching them. I don't watch a lot of TV, but when I do, it tends to be something like that. And so that was the
Fascinating.
thing that got me for sure. But then as I was researching for this, I see, of course, you're from New Orleans, which is one of the most haunted cities in America and probably the world.
Mhm.
And it certainly seems like you know a lot about this subject. So I had to ask, are you also a paranormal junkie?
I wouldn't call myself a junkie. I also don't watch TV that much anymore. We actually just lost Netflix. It was like, goodbye, my friend. But I have watched I used to be obsessed with this one Psychic Kids when it was on for a little while. This was in the early noughts, and it was kids who could see ghosts, and some of them were not awesome and some of them were. And I was just like, and I had a boyfriend at the time, not the one based Dylan is based on, but was a stout atheist, and he was just like would just scoff anytime I was watching it, and I was just like, these kids are making this up, you know.
Right.
But I wasn't obsessed. However, I do think that I saw a ghost when I was younger, um, and I after writing this book, I've had so many people want to tell me their ghost stories, or and I did a book on Jungle Red, or not a book, a piece on Jungle Red about this ghost that I saw, and I had so many people um, writing in on comments saying that they felt presences or had dreams and all this stuff, or why did I think that children saw ghosts more than adults? And my theory, I don't know, obviously, is that children are more open and less, they're willing to accept magic into their lives, for lack of a better phrase. And adults would find it easier to accept this kind of thing when they're unconscious. So I think if we do have visitors as adults, often we will see them that way. That's my little theory.
Well, it is. I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to ask if you'd ever had any paranormal experiences. Um, because I wondered, ideas come from all kinds of places. Now, something like this, and again, feeling like either you've done a lot of really great research, or maybe some of this you'd also had experiences with. So it sounds like you've had at least one experience.
I
Uh,
have had the one experience, and everyone loves the story, so I'll tell the story. Um, when I was probably early double digits, what, 10, 11, 12, somewhere around there, I would wake up in the middle of the night and my bed faced into the room. And so on the foot of my bed, this ghost would pace up and down the room, and she would always be talking to me. She's working something out. She was really enthusiastic, gesturing. She was really into it. And I would watch her, listen to her. And whenever I tried to comment on anything she said, she would look at me and vanish. And then I would just go back to sleep, oh, well. And I never remembered it in the morning until one day I woke up and she was right by my bed, right by the head of my bed, looking down at me with this huge smile on her face. And she said, "Goodbye." And I said, "Where are you going?" And she vanished. And I never saw her again. I remembered all the other times. And
wow.
I tried to tell people about it at first, but people were like, "Oh, you were sleeping, you were dreaming," or other kids would try and make up their own ghost stories to top mine or whatever. So I just stopped telling people until I was in my 20s in Chicago, drunk, coming back from a club with one of my friends. And for some reason, just told her the story. And she said, "Did your mother have a miscarriage before you?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "It was your sister coming to check on you."
Wow.
And I was like, "Oh." So I like to kind of think that maybe she was going off to be born. And that's why she was so happy to go wherever she was going.
Wow. I love that. I see another book in your future there. That's really that's it. Well, and it is true because if you tell a ghost story of any kind, everyone will tell you theirs, which is one of the reasons, when I understand skepticism. I mean, I'm a journalist. I'm skeptical of
Right.
everything, right? But I too have had an experience, one that was particularly terrifying, which I will not bore everybody with now because the show is not about me. But
I'm so interested though.
I will say, um, the interesting thing I think, just on my personal level, I took away from all this is having more questions than answers.
Uh-huh.
Because I think people they want it to be convinced one way or the other, so there's some kind of certainty, because that's what we always want. We're always trying to get rid of the uncertainty in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it was just the opposite. It's like, well, okay, I know what I lived through, I know what I experienced, but now I have more questions than answers, and so I'm just going to leave it at that, right? And
Yeah.
so, um, I don't want to spoil the end of the book because I'm not to the end of the book yet, but did you think about when you were writing this, like, I have to have resolution here, or could you leave it open-ended for sequels and, that kind of a thing?
There's a window open for a sequel. It could end where it ends now.
Okay.
I started writing a sequel and I've had to put it aside because one of the characters is not cooperating and not telling me who he is. So I put it aside for now. I've got a couple other irons in the fire. But yes, it is open. And to your point about resolution, some things I have resolved. There is one point, and I'm trying not to give anything away. There was one point where my editor and I discussed it because I actually had a huge beta read for this book with 20 people on a Zoom call. It was ridiculous. And they were split 20, half and half about how this one point should go. And the debate was so heated. And I was like, I'm going to leave it, let people debate this. And my editor and I discussed it and brought this up. And I was like, you don't always know. You don't always get to know what happens or why something happened. And she said, okay, we can leave it, but you need Rayleigh to at least come to the understanding that she's never going to know
Mm.
and contemplate it and have to move on with that. So I did add that bit in. And so you'll have to tell me if you figure out once you read it what part that is.
Well, and it's so funny how that drives some people crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Like I
I
said, they
find
want,
that the people who it drives crazy, at least with this particular point, make their own decision.
yeah,
They decide this is how it happened.
yeah. Which is what a lot of art is anyway. All art is subjective.
Mhm.
I mean, I mean, yes, sometimes it's nice to have a story wrap up with a nice bow on it, but there's a lot to be said for something that allows you to think about it and interpret it a little bit. I don't mind at
Mhm.
all thinking about something, even if I didn't like how it ended, how I think it ended. I don't mind having that imprint a little bit in my
Right.
reader's brain, right? And I think I appreciate a writer who can do that, actually, who's good enough of a storyteller to have that work out. Um, Speaking of moving on, uh, so I understand that you do have another book coming out next year, I think. Tell me a little bit about that as well,
Oh goodness. Well, this one
if
is
you can.
this one's a little bit I'm going more into the sci-fi realm with this one. And I will say Ghost Tamer is kind of a genre bender. So it's been put in sci-fi fantasy. It was an editor's pick for sci-fi fantasy. So I guess you could argue that I'm not straying too far off the beaten path, but this one is called Dagger of Lightning right now, but that's almost certainly going to change. It's coming out April 1st, 2025, and it is about a middle-aged woman, kind of a wayward spirit, doesn't really know where she fits, and gets kidnapped by an alien and taken to another planet. And she becomes an alien herself. He's a prince of a country about to go to war, and she wants nothing to do with any of it, and or him, and kind of gloms onto his brother and has to figure out her own powers, which become significant, and kind of find herself. So it's kind of an adult coming of age. I was tired of the teenage chosen one who gets thrown into a society of hundreds-year-old beings and somehow ends up running them. So I was like, let's have a middle-aged chosen one. I was tired of teenagers in early 20s getting turned immortal with no appreciation of how your body's going to fall apart. And so I was like, let's have someone with some aches and pains and then get them turned immortal. And let's have that happen. And so that's where that one has come from. And I am supposed to get my first developmental edit back this month. So I am a little scared because this one they've decided they want to take. I had it was sci-fi fantasy, and they've decided let's just take the fantasy part out a little bit and push it more sci-fi. So I'm like, all right, I'm agreeable.
It's one of the things that, and I've talked with other writers on the show about it, but I mean, that's one of the things I think that a lot of writers who are new don't really anticipate how much
Right.
your publisher or your editor is going to have that kind of input and push you sometimes in directions that you're not really comfortable with. So there's a lot of trust that has to be happening here in that process. This wasn't part of my original cadre of questions, but I think it's a good one for us to address.
Hmm.
Um, the trust factor maybe with your editors and your agent or publisher, whoever, how was that process for you? Was it a long one? Was it somebody that you got?
Well, fortunately, it's my same editor who did Ghost Tamer, Helga Shear, and she's amazing. And so she was like, if you are insistent, they discussed this, they were going to buy it. And they were like, we think it would fit better in our list as a sci-fi. And it's got space in it. I've already got, and I didn't want to take my space fight out. And so she's like, if you think we can push it into sci-fi, then I can edit it with you. If you're insistent on keeping the fantasy element, we're going to have to find a freelance editor. And I decided I wanted to stay with her. And so here we are, and we'll see. And then she was like, "Okay, do you have a new title?" And I was like, "No, I don't. I don't." I was like, "Can we wait till you've read it and like brainstorm a new title together? Because I'm awful at titles. They were the last thing I come up with. And honestly, I don't know what you're going to do with it." So, and so we are waiting. So I am eagerly anticipating this first edit for many, many reasons. But yeah,
It is such
it
a
was
process.
definitely a trust thing because I'm very attached emotionally to this one.
It really is a process.
Hmm.
That whole thing at the back and forth, my agent has my current work in progress out in the world now. We've just finished all this stuff, and so she's got stuff out there. And, it's only been a week or so that actually since she started putting it out there. And so, it's way too early to hear anything, but I'm thinking about the process with her and the editor that she works with. And the thing you mentioned the title because you said multiple times you're going to have to change the title.
Oh,
And for some reason, that makes me just want to crawl into a hole. It's like,
I
oh,
was so sad. I was devastated. And it's not an unusual thing, and you know this cognitively, but I
yeah,
tell writer friends this all the time. Like you can cognitively know that you're going to get rejection. You can cognitively know that they're going to want to change your title, but it hits different when it becomes a reality.
yes,
It's a little different.
yes, it is. It definitely does. Definitely does. Well, in the intro, I mentioned several of your other pursuits, which I love. I absolutely love this. And what makes me curious about all this is, they're all very demanding, physically, emotionally, mentally. Um, Tell me how those played into your writing. I mean, were there lessons that you have taken from all of those pursuits that apply to your writing? Were they just distractions that have nothing to do with it whatsoever? I mean, where's there a connection, if any?
I think that people do themselves a disservice if they don't use their entire toolbox when they write things. I have proposed often, no one's taken me up on it yet, a panel or a talk on using your past lives in your writing. Because everyone has experiences and such that no one else has. And I think that they color your world. It's like for instance, I wrote about Chicago in Ghost Tamer, and I lived in Chicago for 17 years. And I've read other books taking place in Chicago, and you can just tell when the person has never set foot in the city and didn't do any research on it or visit it or anything like that. Um, and the same thing is with anything else. I love writing fight scenes in my books, and Dagger has lots of fight scenes. I'm really excited about that. And it's one of the things I've gotten compliments on is the fight scenes. And it's like, well, if you've been punched in the face, if you've thrown a sword around, then you're going to know a little bit more. And why not bring that into your writing? Ghost tamer, loss, grief, funerals, everyone has had that. And everyone has had that emotional, visceral experience. And so why not bring that into your writing if that's what you want to put forth? So yeah, I think everything that I have experienced, I do put in my writing. I haven't put a DJ in there yet. but there's time, there's other books to be written.
Well, it's interesting too. I've become focused to some extent on the martial arts and this sorts of
Hmm.
that's definitely different. But I've actually talked to several authors who have come from performing either stage, film
Yeah.
occasionally, a lot of screenwriters, TV writers that have been on the show here, and I'm really fascinated by, as you noted, everything in the toolbox for moving into writing, because this is very different from
Yeah.
all of those things. Very, very different. And I'm
I
just
am
curious.
curious about those other writers you had that were actors. Did you find that their character development was really good and their dialogue?
Yes,
I
actually.
think that that is a thing.
And that's the reason I wanted to ask you about that, because you were an actor. You spent a lot of time in that pursuit.
17
How
years.
much did that specifically inform your writing?
I don't think I consciously said I'm going to take this from acting and put it into my writing, but after dissecting it with other writers, other friends, um, everyone has complimented the dialogue in my writing. And I know personally that I'm a very character focused reader and writer. If it doesn't have good characters, I'm not interested. If I don't like the characters, I'm not interested. And I think that comes from acting because as an actor, you figure out your character first and you embody your character, and then that character will react to the other characters on stage in a realistic way. Your dialogue is the first thing you're going to know. You're going to learn the story so that you can go out on stage and just, even if you get thrown, story is there. So if you say something slightly different, you know where you're supposed to be going in the scene. So I think all of that comes out when you're writing something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm really fascinated by first novels. And the reason I think I'm so fascinated by first novels is because they're almost never the first novel the person has actually written. It's just the
Right.
first one that we got to publication, right? So what was the time frame, I guess, for you with Ghost Tamer from concept to publication? How long was that process? And how much did it evolve from that first concept to what we saw or see now in the finished product?
So Ghost Tamer was not my first novel written. First one was when I was 13. It was 636 pages on lined paper, handwritten with pencil. I still have it in a binder, but I will say that Ghost Tamer did um, get published quickly in terms of the world that we're in. I wrote it in from July to December of 2021 and baited it, got feedback that I wasn't ready for, threw it in a drawer, decided this is terrible, started writing Dagger of Lightning, and then started shopping that one because I decided this is the best one, this is the one, and had stopped basically querying Ghost Tamer, stopped submitting it until I went to I had paid for one of those agent things, you're pitching your book, and researched them, of course, as you do, pitched Dagger of Lightning, and at the time the aliens were Fae. They are not anymore. And the the agent was like, "Oh, that sounds great. I don't like Fae." And I was like, there was nothing on that in my research. So I had other questions that I asked. I didn't waste the time, but I was like, this can't happen to me again. I paid for these sessions. So I pulled out my Ghost Tamer pitch just in case. 2 agents later, that's great. I don't like Fae. What about ghosts? Do you like ghosts? And pitched Ghost Tamer. She's like, first 50 pages, please. Was like, okay. And then had to yank it out and dust off those first 50 pages. And I was reading it and I was like, this actually isn't that bad of a story. This is actually a good story. And the feedback I got is actually not that difficult and very actionable. So I brushed Ghost Tamer off, but still wasn't, I pitched it a couple agents, but still was on my kick with this other one and decided, you know what, I'm going to send Ghost Tamer direct to publisher and just see how it goes. And it got picked up and didn't take it very long, 3 months maybe. And then it came out in September of 2023. So being finished in December of 2021 and being published in September of 2023 is actually pretty fast.
Yeah.
And as far as how much it changed, it did not change a ton. When I look at how other works of mine have changed, how Dagger is going to change, how much Dagger has already changed, Ghost Tamer didn't change a lot. Every reiteration, every feedback would change it a little bit, but the essential story has been the same.
Well, that's all of that's really interesting. And that is fast. That's
It's
a pretty, but then that's also, I
not
mean, in a
typical.
lot of ways that's a good thing.
Mhm.
That's a good thing. And it's always interesting too. This is why I've had so many writers tell me, you know, they will put something away and not look at it for a long time.
Yeah.
Uh, sorry, shameless name dropping here, but I've had Craig Johnson on the show before, and Craig Johnson, of course, writes the Longmire.
Right. My mom's a huge fan.
Yeah, and he's a great guy, and he tells the story of, he wrote this manuscript and decided it was awful. He put it in a drawer and forgot about it. He literally had moved to Wyoming and was, you know, building a cabin and doing everything but writing. And at some point, he ran into, I believe it was the county sheriff at the gas station, who asked him what he ever did with that manuscript. And he said, well, he essentially didn't want to tell him he wasn't doing anything with it. So he went home later, pulled it out of the drawer, started the polishing process, and that became the very first Longmire novel.
Wow.
So, and he said it had been 10 years. So I've had other authors. I mean, again, if you're a regular audience member of this show, you've heard me talk about Jess Walter. I'm sorry, I am not trying to name drop, but it's the greatest story ever, because he told me The Beautiful Ruins, which is my favorite, I call it, literary novel ever. He said it took him 13 years to write. So,
Wow.
and then everything changed exponentially. The main character originally was a man, later became a woman, and on and on and on, right? And so I think, that is so much more normal. I hear that so
That
often.
is much more typical.
Yeah, if you've got something that you can actually get out there relatively quickly, I think that's a great thing, because normally when that happens, it's somebody just, maybe it's a self-published or indie published thing and they just don't want
Right.
to go through that process. But when you've actually gone through the process and you still have that level of success, that's great. And like I say, it's a very fast-paced read, and I can see, the appeal right off for people in the business. So kudos.
Thanks. Yeah. I'm sorry. I always feel bad telling that story because it is not typical. And none of my other things have gone that fast. It's just for people who need the encouragement.
Well, you know what? Again, they've all heard, and this, well, again, especially if they've watched this show, they've heard those other stories a lot, but they hear it all the time, right? So I think it's also good to hear something that's really encouraging, right? This is a lonely business.
Yeah, it is.
If you're not polishing the seat with your backside, you're not doing it, right? You have to put that time in. So it's people should have some hope that it won't take you 10 or 13 years to get from A to B. Um, I really want to ask you too, because you're pretty active on social media, and
Yeah.
a lot of writers feel they have to be, but this is a real bugaboo with me. And um, I'm going to give you more kudos here, and I'm sorry if your husband later on says, "Who swelled your head up to this size?" It was the guy on the YouTube show, but no, seriously, all the kidding aside, it drives me crazy when authors use social media only, their only messages: buy my book, buy my book, buy my
Yeah.
book. Did you know I have a book? Hey, buy my book. I will intentionally not buy a book when that's all I'm getting, because it drives me nuts. And
I,
so I
I get
really
that.
notice when a writer uses social media, and it doesn't matter which one, the old Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, whatever, Facebook, but they use it as a tool for engaging with readers and trying to build an audience that way. And from everything I've seen of what you have on TikTok and on the other socials, you really do use that well. So tell me, please tell me that was intentional. But give me a little bit of thought, I guess, on your social media outlook and how you go about using it.
Oh my goodness. I have a fraught relationship with social media.
Well, as
When
all
I
writers do, by the way.
Yeah, because you do feel like you have to be on it. And I'm actually intentionally this year I have taken a step back from how often I was on it because fun story, I got an ulcer. So apparently, when you get super stressed, promoting a book can happen. But so I was looking in ways to de-stress my life and things that I felt pressured to do, um, that maybe I didn't have to do. And so I did decide, all right, I don't have to post on social media every single week if I have nothing to say. I don't have a book coming out until April, so I'm not feeling the need to stay in people's faces all the time. And it was a good time for me to take a step back. But even before that, I I know, I tried to take an associate degree in marketing. I've taken the classes. I know that everything is supposed to be planned and curated, and I know all of those things, but I prefer to share fun things on social media as it was originally intended, I think. And so now, and still, even when I was in the midst of, um, trying to promote and gain an audience and what have you, I couldn't resist throwing up pictures of my cats every now and then. They're adorable. People like them. And I frankly, I need somewhere to store the pictures that's not my phone. I don't want to delete them. They're so cute. And then, you find fun things. I put up something this week. I found an old picture of or video and came up in my Facebook memories from 13 years ago of me and another martial arts friend in the blizzard. Chicago had an amazing blizzard 13 years ago, and we decided to walk to each other because we're stranded in the middle of the blizzard. I had like a lantern. She had a bike headlight. And then we found a bar that was open and got some of the patrons to film us kickboxing in the blizzard in the middle of Lincoln Avenue. And so I still have it. And I was
I
like,
have
this is
seen it. I saw
I was
how
like,
you're.
this is fun. I'm going to resurrect this video and threw it up. So, I mean, that's what makes social media fun to me. And another thing that I think is important is promoting other people. Um, and it's more fun, I think, for everyone to see pictures of you with other humans.
Mhm.
I think that's fun in stage. I think it's fun in books. I mean, the most interesting parts of books are the characters getting along with each other or fighting with each other or something with each other. The most interesting parts of the stage, I used to hate monologues because it's like me by myself. So I would imagine another person that I was talking to. You can't just talk to the air. It's not interesting. And I think the same thing with social media. It's so much more interesting when you are talking about something or someone or some being that you are passionate about and enjoying, which is why it's so annoying when it's like, look at my book. Here's my book, And I mean, you do have to throw up your book every now and then so people are aware that it exists. But I do think people will tune out if it's just that all the time. People want to see other things. And I do a lot of jokes in my stories because I think that's interesting. I like to see funny memes. I like to see people's cat videos, and I know that I'm interested if friends of mine are in someone's pictures and it looks like it's a good time. So that's my philosophy. I mean, yes, you have to let people know about the deals and the discounts and what have you. And when there's a fun thing happening, but it's so much more interesting if you're letting them know about other people that you love, other things that you love. And, of course, your adorable dog, like rolling around in the background has been very interesting to me this whole time.
Yeah, she's yes. She appears a lot and that's the benefit of watching it on YouTube as opposed to the podcast. You get to see one of my crazy dogs in the background doing their
Yeah.
they're good. Um, you know, every writer also brings something very particular to them into a story. And sometimes
Mhm.
it's the kind of plotting they do or the characters. I'm with you. I'm a very much a character as a reader and as a writer, very driven by character, much more so than plot. Like a lot of people, I'll stick with a story where I like the characters and the plot's okay, but I will not stick with a story where I don't like the characters. I don't care how
Exactly.
good the plot is. So I'm with you on that. Um, but one of the more interesting things ever said to me on that front was every novel needs to have a heartbeat. It needs to have a through line that a reader can connect to, right?
Mhm.
That just keeps them together with the story. And I'm curious. So I ask a lot of the authors that come on the show this question, what for you creates that heartbeat in your storytelling, whether it's the novel or a blog or anything else, when you're storytelling, what is it that creates that heartbeat for you?
Gosh, I don't know if you can put a finger on it. I feel like it just happens. I know that's super frustrating. When you can, well, used to do a blog weekly. Again, also dropped it down to a couple times a month. But every now and then you get a blog post and it would just fly out of my fingers. But I did learn that you can sit down and force yourself to write, and something will come out of it. And you can find the heartbeat if you make yourself do it. But I think it's much more fun if it's just already there. And I don't know when or how that happens. With most of my stories with Ghost Tamer, I had a nightmare about a train crash, and I started writing the nightmare, and it was going to be a short story. And then 97,000 words later, it was, so much more, because I found these two characters and I just wanted to see what happened with them. And with Dagger, I was reading a lot of fantasy. I was in my early 40s, and had just experienced my first debilitating injury that was like, this is going to take a while to heal, and you might not be the same. So my own little mortality. And I would finish a book. You know how you finish a book and there's magic, and you try and reach for something across the room and it doesn't fly into your hand and you're mad. You're like, why can't I have powers? Why can't I get taken by the Fae? And I was like, would you really like that if that happened? And so I started to explore that idea. What would it be like if that actually happened to you? Um, my work in progress that I'm on now, that I've just finished a uh second draft on, Jim Latois, who you've had on your show. I watched him do a talk, and I wasn't really interested in the topic. I just went because it was him and I was going to support him, and there was nothing else I was interested in the conference. And he was talking about prison gangs, and I was like, magical prison gangs, and just couldn't stop writing it. And I think it just hits you, and when it hits you, you just grab onto it and you have to go with it. So I don't know if that answers your question well enough. I feel like if you're having fun doing it, then people are going to have fun reading it. If you're kind of bored, people are going to be bored.
I think maybe that's the heartbeat. It's different. Again, maybe the process is different for everybody, but I think maybe that's, in a way, that's really a great answer, because what I'm hearing is, you have to like the story you're telling. You have to
Mhm.
be interested in it. And I think, as a writer, if you're losing interest in your story, there's no way in the world you're going to keep anyone
Right.
else interested in it either. You have to love it. So maybe that's it. Maybe that's the heartbeat. It's probably different for everybody, but that's
I think
that's
so.
well, I I also ask everybody this question. So because I think it's so important. This is, anything creative that you're putting into the public
Yeah.
sphere, you are opening yourself up to rejection, ridicule,
Yes.
probably a dozen other horrible things. But it's all part of it. And
Mhm.
so I'm curious, how do you handle either rejection or even just bad reviews? Do you read reviews? Do you care about reviews? Do they incapacitate you if it's something bad? What's your visceral reaction to the negative parts of, having your work out there in the public?
It is ever evolving, I think. And I get a lot of questions about rejection with acting versus rejection with writing, because I got so used to acting rejection. It happens, you eat it for breakfast. It's different with writing. And I think the reason is because acting, there's so many reasons that you might not have been right. You could have had a bad day. It could have been a bad audition. Your hair color might not have been right. But with your book, this is the most perfect it's ever going to be. It is in stasis. You have put everything in it and you just send your little soul out. And that's how it is. And it hurts. And maybe I will allow, I think it's an evolving thing. It may get easier the longer I do it, just as acting did. But it stings a little different. I personally had to stop reading the 1 and 2 star reviews. I read them all at first. And at first, of course, you're getting, a whole lot of 4s and 5s. And the occasional 3, and that's fine. And the thing is you're not going to be for everyone. You cannot be all things for all people. So there are just, I tell people this when they're getting critiques too. Some people would have just written a different book. And those aren't the things you listen to. if it's a critique about, you're doing some harm or something unintentionally, then maybe that's something to listen to. But most of the time, that's not it. And I found that it was throwing me um, a little bit to get the negative reviews. So I don't read the negative ones. On Goodreads, you can filter for the fives, you can filter for the fours. So every now and then I'll go check, read those for a little boost. But I have to be in a very good frame of mind to read the negative ones. And I sometimes am in that frame of mind. And when I know that I am, then I'll go and I'll, maybe check them out. But I don't seek that out anymore. Because there's always going to be people who don't like what you do. And anything that could possibly kill your drive or motivation isn't worth it, I don't think, because in
Right.
order to stay in this, you're going to have to be in it for a while.
Right.
So
And,
that's,
I'll be honest. I see some of the dumbest things. I mean, look,
oh, yeah,
everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but some of the things that people get upset about or will trash people over are just like, my God, man. What?
my first one-star review, someone was angry that they couldn't find the names of the ghosts that I had made up on Wikipedia. And I had used big words other than that, and they listed literally the five, big words that I used. Diaphanous was one of them. And they were just like, this was dumb. And yet they couldn't find Jemani in the Wikipedia, so they were mad. So I was like, yeah, I don't think I need to be reading these.
Right. Anyway. Well, yeah, it is really, like I say, it's really silly. There's some, news sites and things that I read, and every now and then I'll also, people comment on a story and they'll bitch and complain about the author, about the writer, reporter, and
Right,
this, that, and the other thing. And I always think you're paying money to get this content, and yet you bitch and complain constantly about the publication and its writers. Why don't you just cancel? But no,
right.
right? So that's why I think I ask
Some
that
people
question
just
a
want to
lot.
be angry.
Some people do want to be angry. They're not happy unless they're unhappy. But that's the reason I ask writers this question, because I think if you're going to get into this at whatever level, you have to be prepared for that. Because if
Hmm.
you think look, if you want nothing but great reviews, just have your mom read it,
Yeah, exactly.
But if you want someone other than your mom to read it, you're going to have to be prepared that people are going to say sometimes really hurtful, stupid things. And you just
Yeah,
have to be able to go, okay, either that or well, do what you do. Don't read them unless you're in the right
right.
frame of mind. Well, I always like to end on what I hope is a fun question. I intend for it to be a fun question. So I'm going to be the omnipotent being here, and I'm going to give you three names of people that, let's just say I had the power to put you together with one of these three people for a conversation, a good drink, maybe I don't know, a good kickboxing round. I don't know. Who would you choose and why? And I try to have a theme to the
Okay.
folks, so we'll see if you recognize the theme or not. So the options I'm going to give you are the actress Sandra Bullock,
Oh,
Marie Laveau, the great well-known spiritualist, and the musician singer Aaron Neville. Which of those three, if I could put you together with them, would you choose to hang out with for a bit, and
this
why?
is wow, this is interesting. Hmm. Well, I've been compared to Sandra Bullock before, and she seems like a very nice person. And so I'm sure we would have a great time, but I think Marie Laveau would be super interesting. I think I would love to chat with her. I think that would be fascinating.
Awesome. Yeah, I think she would be too. And the theme, in case I'm sure you probably picked up on it, those all three of those are New Orleanians. Since I know you came from New Orleans, so I gave you three.
Yeah.
I guess I got to pick Chicago or Nashville, but I thought I love New
No.
Orleans, one of my favorite cities, so I thought we'll go with that one. So,
Yep, I like it.
well. This has been a lot of fun, Meredith. Like I say, I'm really enjoying the book. I'm looking forward to the rest of it. I appreciate you coming on the show today, sharing some insights into the book, into your writing, into social media, and all the other things we talked about today. Looking forward to the next book as well.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a great time.
Oh, good. I'm glad. I'm always glad to hear that. So, before I sign us off, though, I do have to remind people, please, if you haven't done so, hit subscribe, leave the review, help other people find this show, this particular episode, and the rest of the show. I'm on all the major podcast platforms as well. Also helps there. So, if you'd be so kind, I would appreciate it. And also, the thing that I always leave us with, and I mean this very sincerely from the bottom of my heart, tomorrow, it is not promised to anybody. So please, whatever your passions are, pursue them and make today count. For my guest, Meredith Lyons, for myself, Rich Eisen, and for my two crazy dogs in the background who are cooperating today by being nice and silent, this has been the Open Mic. We will see you next time.